Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about basic pot limit Omaha strategy, so let's get started. So one of the first things that's different about having 4 cards is the number of combinations you can make. Most people assume with 4 cards that generally their hands will be twice as strong, but because you can make 6 different 2-card combinations, it's probably closer to 6, maybe closer to 5 times as strong. Another thing that's different between Texas Hold'em and Omaha is that pretty much every hand has to improve in order to win. One pair will almost never win in pot limit Omaha. Another difference is that there's something called a wraparound straight draw, or a wrap for short. And let me show you an example of this. So let's say we were dealt the hand 10-9-8-7, and the flop comes down 6-5-2. This would be an example of a 13 out wrap. So for instance, if a 4 came on the turn, that would give us a straight, but because we would use the 8-7 from our hand and the 6-5-4 from the board, but so too would be, for instance, if a 7 came down, then we would use the 9-8 from our hand, and same would be true with an 8. We could use the 9 and the 7 from our hand, and with the 9 we could use the 8 and the 7 from our hand. So in this example we would have 13 outs, and the wraps come in many different varieties, but in general a wrap will have more outs than a typical open-ended or gut-shot straight draw you would have in Texas Hold'em. So it can be anywhere from 9 to 20 outs. Another difference is that there's more situations where 2 people have a reason to continue with the hand after the flop. So frequently somebody might flop 2 pair, another person might flop a wrap, another person might flop a straight draw and a flush draw, something like that. And as a result, in addition, people tend to play looser pre-flop. So as a result, there tends to be less bluffing, and slow playing is a lot more dangerous since people tend to be on draws a lot more. Also, because of this, there tends to be more action, the pots tend to be larger, and in general, the game tends to play about twice as big as similar stakes in Texas Hold'em. So a 1-2 pot limit Omaha game would probably play bigger than a 1-3 no limit game, but a little smaller than a 2-5 game. Now, because these pots tend to be multi-way, because it's more dangerous to bluff and slow play, position tends to be more important, since generally people are going to be playing their hands more straightforwardly. So if everybody checks you, that's generally an indicator of weakness or somebody's on a draw, and vice versa. So one of the most key ideas about pot limit Omaha, perhaps the most important, is having nut hands is very important. If you don't have a nut hand or a very strong draw to the nuts, then your hand is almost always vulnerable. So first let's look at what are typical winning hands in Texas Hold'em. So the most common winning hands would be pair and 2-pair hands, specifically big pairs and big 2 pairs, with high card, 3 of a kind, straights, flushes, and full houses sometimes winning, and on very rare occasions you'll see 4 of a kind or straight flush. With Omaha, it's very typical for straights, flushes, and full houses to be the winning hands, with some hands being won by 2-pair and 3 of a kind, and also some occasionally 4 of a kind. Pairs, high cards, and straight flushes are very rare as winning hands. And because it's much easier to make a straight or a flush or full house, it's much more common in this game for two people to make a straight, or two people to make a flush, or two people to make a full house. So it's important to have the best possible straight, the best possible flush, or the best possible full house. So with that in mind, what kind of flops are good flops? Well, first of all, top set is a very strong hand. The top two pairs, a very good hand. They both give you the possibility of making a full house, and some of the time they may be able to win without improving further. Middle set is still a fairly strong hand, although there are occasions where you're going to have to fold it if the action's too crazy. But since it only has to worry about one overset, it's fairly strong. Strong wraps tend to be fairly good, especially if it's a rainbow board. And like combo draws, like open-handed straight draw plus flush draw, those kinds of hands. And obviously if you have combinations of both, that's even better. So like top two pair and a flush draw is a very strong hand, and so forth. Now, with those kinds of flops in mind, what kind of starting hands are we looking for? Well, the best way to evaluate starting hands is to look at these factors. So you need 4 cards that work together. And you also need hands that are capable of making the nuts. So things that will give your hand value are generally things like pairs, particularly high pairs, since they can make a top set or sometimes middle set. High cards are good because you'll tend to make top 2 pair. Suited cards, particularly suited aces, and obviously suited kings are a little weaker, suited queens are even weaker, but generally suited cards will give you a chance to make a flush. And also very strong are connected cards, sometimes called rundowns. So an example would be a hand like 9-8-7-6. And these hands give you a lot of straight potential. So with that said, I'm going to open up a program I wrote called the Omaha Odds Wizard. And this program is very useful. It'll tell you exactly what the odds of hitting different hands are, and even break down what kind of straight draws you can get on the flop. If you want to check it out, it's at my website, pokeroddswizard.com. So let's take some examples of some very strong hands. So an example of a very strong hand would be something like Ace Jack 10 double suited. If I click calculate, it'll tell you the percentages. Now, one big difference between Omaha and Texas Hold'em is there's really no hand that's as strong as pocket aces is in Texas Hold'em. Even the best hands in this game will still hit the flop hard less than 50% of the time, and there's really no hand that can win unimproved, unlike say aces, which can often win at showdown even if they haven't improved. In this game you really have to flop a set or a straight or something like that. So if we look at this hand, we can see by the river it makes a flush about a little less than 14% of the time, full house about 9.5% of the time, and a straight about 10% of the time. And if we look on the flop, we could see the breakdown of some of the different straight draws. So a lot of gut shot, some 8 outs, and a 12 out wraps occasionally. And you can see your flush draw percentages back here. So, but let's look at a more typical hand. Ace Jack 10 and Ace King double suited are generally considered the strongest hands in Omaha. There's some debate about which is stronger, which is kind of an academic argument. But let's look at another hand that would be fairly strong. Let's say Queen Jack 10 single suited, and let's This would be an example of another strong hand. You've got a pair and you've got 3 cards that are connected, which gives you straight potential and top set potential. And you can see from this, it hits top set a lot more, sometimes middle set, obviously very rarely bottom set, since queens are pretty strong, pretty high pair. And it gives you some wraps and some open-ended straight draws, and also gut shot straight draws, and you can see you pick up a flush draw some of the time. Other strong hands would be like connected hands, like Jack 10, 9, 8, in this case double suited. And if we run the calculations, you'll see it hits a straight quite frequently, about 22% of the time by the river. And you pick, and in this case it's double suited, so you'll hit flushes a fair amount of time. Occasionally full houses. And if we look at the straight draws, you see it flops a lot of 13 out wraps. And I'll give another example. These are all very strong hands. You're not always going to find hands this perfect. So let's say something like ace 6 5 4, and it's suited to the ace. So this hand has, you have 3 connected cards that give you some straight potential. You've also got a suited ace, so you've got nut flush potential. And this would be another example of a good hand. And you can see it makes a straight, not as often as the 4 card rundown, but 17%, makes the nut flush about 7% of the time. So that should give you a basic idea of how this game is played. If you like, hopefully you like, if you like the program I'm demonstrating, you can download it for free off my website, pokeroddswizard.com. You'll see a link for it in the description. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.